We met last night for the first time. The only thing I knew about her prior to that, don't do it, is that she's a junior at the Master's University. Just finished her junior year. She gave me a list of repertoire, and we decided to go with something pretty mainstream. This is the A minor Mozart piano sonata. And last night I asked her just a few questions. I asked her what her plans are to be in life, which is a collaborative pianist. I asked her what her favorite music was, which was Justin Bieber. I'm just kidding. No, it was a Debussy and Baroque music. And then I asked her if I can touch her, which is the only profession I can do that in the first 5 minutes. And so she agreed. So obviously very important if you're going to work with anything physical. So that's just a little bit of a background. And we'll probably go through it. I'll stop you. The reason I decided to do it this way is because we all come in contact with transfer students or give demo lessons or something, and you're kind of forced right away to say something or to think of something. So I'm going to just do that. So let's go. Cool. Let's stop there. Thank you very much. Excellent. So I really noticed that you are very sensitive. Beautiful musicality. I also noticed that sometimes I think we cannot be beautiful in our playing. And in this particular sonata, it's one of the chances that we don't have to be beautiful. This is in my opinion. Now, you've already played this for your junior recital, so this is at a level where you're already performing, and so the angle is probably mostly interpretation, right? And you can take what I say, or you can throw it out the window. Okay. So, tell me a little bit about this sonata. What do you know about it?
Well, do you want like
just maybe some background information, what's interesting about it, so it'll give us a starting point.
It's one of the earlier sonatas. I think, well, Mozart, because he did a lot of opera work, I find when I play this that I can hear a lot of storyline in it.
Yes, okay, great. Let's go with that. Let's go with opera storyline. I personally don't, we always think Mozart opera, yes. Sometimes, no. And in this case, I don't think so. It was written in 1778. Yeah. Do you know what happened to Mozart at that time?
Can't remember now.
Okay, so it was like he was miserable, completely like suicidal. Well, not maybe suicidal, but his mom just died. He was miserable in Paris. He hated it there. He traveled to Paris with his mom for the first time, and she, yeah, well, and I think it's his first time really feeling anguish, right? Mm-hmm. And the reason I say we shouldn't maybe do opera, because this is not necessarily the nicest singable line. Right. It's not really much, you know, it's kind of ugly. So what really captures this anguish, now that you know this? How can we express that?
More of a biting, I guess.
More of a biting? Can you show me what you would do? Okay, cool. I like the biting. It adds a little bit of articulation. Mm-hmm. Great, what else?
Driving.
I mean, I see a string quartet doing this. Okay. And the viola player, as much as we hate them, go like, and then from here, da, 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 da. I mean, 1778, that's pretty ugly.
Yeah.
And so I think really, it's this anger, and I want to explore ways we can make this a little less beautiful and more just he's completely out of it. Okay. All right. Kind of put yourself in that. And can I just hear the left hand by itself? You are the best string quartet in the world right now. No. Pay them a little bit more money. Okay, we're getting somewhere. What's the most, before a string quartet starts to play, what do they do?
Breathe together.
They breathe, but how do they breathe? Like you're breathing right now like you're...
It's very...
Yeah, can you show me that? Sniff louder. Yes, okay, now let's try it again. Now keep the forte, keep the tension there. You want all of us to zero in on what you're about to say. Yes, great. Did you know that you lost energy throughout that bar? Can you listen so that this moves to there and you're still apologizing. Sometimes when we play Mozart, we apologize too much, and the guy knew how to live, right? He was a mensch, a real mensch. So, can you try it again? Okay. I think that captures a little bit more of the anger. Don't apologize at the end. That cellist is waiting for that. That's the only time he's being heard, right? Can you try it again? Let's try it. 1, 2, 3, 2, and come back. And yes, absolutely, absolutely. I feel this way, that a lot of times we neglect what's going on with the left hand. Now add that bite to the right hand, and let's see what we come out with. Let's try it again, because you're phrasing it a little bit differently right now. Can we try it one more time? Your body is telling me something different than what the music is telling me, because you do this. And that's telling me that's the top of the phrase. Mm-hmm. Can you temper what you're doing so that you bring us to this moment here and then back off? That was like, here it is. Bring us there a little bit.
Okay.
So yum bum ba bum bum ba da da da. Da, da, dee. Okay, good. Now, do you think? I ask myself a lot of times, what is the point? What's the point of this? Is this an afterthought, or is this a confirmation? Is it, or is it a?
Probably the latter.
I think I feel the latter.
Yeah.
And I want you to commit to that thought a little bit more till the very end. Don't apologize, because then it'll make this more effective, right? Not every phrase ending has to end in a decrescendo, right? Let's try it again. 1, 2, 3, breathe. Let's try that. I know it's awkward, and you're doing fabulous in adjusting to everything. Let's try it one more time. 2, 3. Okay, now how do we make this transition? Well, first of all, do you have any questions?
No.
How, was it clear,
Yeah.
kind of what we're trying to do? You're doing fabulous. Remember, they're judging me, not you. Okay. How do we get from here? If you were a conductor and you had dee, da, 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 does it have to be 100% in tempo?
I don't think so, no.
I don't think so either. So what are some ways that you can separate, you know, as performing artists, one of the hardest things we have to do is change characters instantly, right? We're a little schizophrenic in that way, where we have to do this and we have to do that. Because this is different. How do we do that? How do we train ourselves to make that instantly?
Well, when you're depressed, you don't really think, I guess, rationally. You're kind of jumping from thought to thought.
Yeah.
So maybe,
I don't know if
like anguish, depression. I mean, his mom just died, so if
well,
I would
his
feel
mom just died.
depressed.
There's a second part to
Just
this story.
angry.
His mom just died, and his dad blamed him
Oh.
for her death. That sucks.
So maybe here he's, mad at his dad, and here he's like, oh, but mom.
Oh, but maybe like, yeah, but mama. Okay, so how do we do that? How do we make this? How do we change so quickly? We need to separate. You know, we have to be committed to the end of something, and we have to be committed from the beginning of something, right? And so I think what we can do if we had time is we can kind of make sure that our ending is really convincing.
Finished.
Can we try that? Just that bar. You did your last note. That's probably going to be a down bow. You play the violin. Oh, that's another question I asked her. Does she play any other instruments? And so this is why I went the string quartet route. That's probably going to be a down bow, right? Exactly. Okay. Now, what is this going to be? Yeah, you're going to play probably
Up bow, maybe?
up bow, but at the very tip of your bow, right? You're not going to play it out here. You're going to play it out here.
Yeah.
So what does that mean in terms of, are you using less or
It's
more?
light.
It's light.
Yeah, you're using less bow space.
Less bow space, and you're not going to be digging, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't dig that far out. So it's going to be up, 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 or up, up, up. Good. Can we do? And I want you to think that down bow, and I want you to immediately think that up bow. But we're going to breathe in between. We're going to do an exercise like this. Just put a little space in there. No, yeah. Good, good. Should we try it again? And that first one was a little kick, right? You went. Bing. That's why we're putting space in between. Excellent. I spoke too soon. I'm just kidding. Let's try it one more time. I want to. How much time do I have?
I'm coming in just a minute.
Uh-oh. That, all right. Okay.
Yeah, finish up that passage.
Okay, let's try it one last time.
From the beginning?
Yeah,
Sorry.
so we're gonna go breathe.
Breathe.
We're putting, let's do this. Let's put a whole beat in between. One. So that you have time to make in your mind that transition. This is only, you're not gonna perform it this way. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get you to commit to the very end, to change your mindset, because it's physically changing, right? You're going from a down bow to an up bow, meaning you're going from something rather heavy to something very light. So let's put a beat in between. Here we go. 2, 3, and one whole beat. 1. 1. Excellent. Was that? Can you do that better?
Yeah.
What can you do better?
Commit more to the beginning of the phrase.
Yes, at the beginning of that phrase. Okay, cool. I think we're going to stop there. We have a little bit of giving you something to think about, because this comes out a lot of places in this sonata. And the reason I wanted you to play, to at least begin the development section, is I wanted you to think about how this is different. Because we think it's nice and happy, but then he throws another curveball at us. So what's going to be, how are you going to bring that to light? Okay, so there's a little bit of some things to think about. So just to recap real quick, think about what happened in that fateful year, 1778, and how does that best serve the music? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I think we're going to...
I'm lurking.
You are lurking.
I'm lurking.
We have this thing where I go like this,
Yeah,
it's
that's
going
right.
to save me from tanking.
Yeah, we have the cue. Tell me your name one more time.
Abby.
You're lovely. Abby, thank you so much for doing it. Can we all thank Abby for doing it? Stay. But stay there, okay?
Yeah.
This is lovely. I just want to mess with you for just a minute before we do this. Because, first of all, you obviously communicated to Abby what you wanted her to do, and she was doing it beautifully. You're a lovely player. One thing I noticed, so could you go back to the first passage that you were working on before? And just start where you started, and see if you can incorporate the things that Jovanni was asking you to do in that thing. Okay. One thing that I noticed, and I'm just going to say this quickly, and then we're going to all talk together a little bit more, is that about the time that Jovanni stopped talking, there was literally fractions of a second before you started playing. So I'd like you to do this. I'd like you to get ready to play and be still for a moment, and then start. Just see what happens. Just be still for a moment and think about what you're going to do. I don't know about you, that speaks to me in a different way. We forget that when music starts, what happens before the music starts is part of the music, And a lot of times we all work with students and we say, would you play right there? And they're playing already, And I think when you wait and you think, it not only does something for your own head, like you were doing, putting the rest before the transition to the next kind of character, right? Not only that, but it does something for a listener as well, because of these moments of still. And then you think, okay, so what do I want to happen after the stillness, right? What do I want that transition to be like, right? It's not like the music starts when you play the first note. The music starts before the first note, right? And the first note is now coming in the music. So let's just chat a little bit. Can we just stay here? I mean, you all can see us, right? We don't need to move the chairs or anything. So I'd like to ask you, since you're here and Shreyan wasn't, maybe we should move so so they can see you. How about that? How about you? Perfect. You've done this kind of thing before, right? You've played for strange teachers in your life before, right? Yeah. So can you just tell me, what are you thinking about while this is happening, Abby?
Trying to forget all of you guys.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, because that's easy to do. Yeah.
And then pretend like I'm actually in a lesson format where it's just private and where I would be with a teacher really working to hone something.
Yeah. Can I ask, as Giovanni was asking you to do the things he was asking you to do, did you always get it, or did it take several repetitions before you understood what was supposed to happen?
I got it the first time. Execution was a little bit more difficult. But I think.
Yeah. Could I ask how you measure that? Because one of the things that you do several times, which I think many teachers are loath to do, especially with little children, is to say, no, that wasn't it. I mean, I think in an effort to be encouraging, we often give mushy feedback, and say, well, it's better, meaning you were awful a minute ago and now you're terrible, it's better, and I think you just are really straightforward about, no, that isn't it. And to me, that seems to function so positively in the lesson, and you didn't seem, I mean, yeah, I knew
I appreciate that kind of feedback,
yeah.
helps me.
I think most students do, even though I think many teachers worry that they don't. Could you talk about that aspect of that a little bit? I mean, because clearly you have a very vivid idea about what you want to have happen. And if it's not that, you're not going to say, well, that was close, so let's go on, right? Can you talk about that a little bit?
I've read your articles.
Well, you can just go ahead and quote.
There are 19 of them. Well, it's required reading. No, but I think what I've noticed is that we spend a lot of time talking, and I was raised in an environment where my teachers never gave praise when they didn't want it, and I didn't hear what I wanted to hear, so I just went, no, and let's try it again, and she knew exactly what was wrong, and she was able to fix it. Now, if I said no a few times and she didn't get it, then we would have backed up. But it seemed at the time that she just needed time, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something that I think we don't think about. Is okay, give her a second, let her process it, and then let her go. And sometimes I might make a blanket statement like, "Oh, that was better," but I don't like it. And if it was better, I'll tell them it was better, if they're coming closer to it. But it was very short. What I wanted her to do was to make a phrase to the second bar, and it was that was it. And so if it was like a whole performance of a piece, and it was actually better, then I would have been like, oh, these things were better.
The other thing I want to ask about was just the size of the workspace that you chose. Because I think, many times when someone has come prepared, you have the notes pretty much, and you're doing this thing. We sort of try to approach this huge section of a piece all at once, and you took very small bits of it. Could you talk a little bit about your thinking in that, about how you decide how big a chunk you're going to go after?
Well, in this case, there are a lot of transferable issues here. With the left, especially with the left hand, that span across really the whole sonata. I wanted to hear what she did with the development section because of that. How does the left hand change in that? And my students know that I'm a very big fan of left hand playing, and that the left hand is as important as anything else. And plus, there are things about the dramatic character that I think she can transfer to every portion of it. The reason I decided to stop there, besides time, is that I think the whole sonata is a little schizophrenic, and I needed to kind of communicate how she would deal with that throughout the whole sonata, how she would deal with committing to the end of something and not apologizing or not showing the end of the phrase, because when I'm listening to it, I want to feel that I don't know what's happening next. And so if that A minor, da 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 dum, and then something follows it, it happens throughout everything.
I also noticed how often you refer to something other than just playing the piano. I mean, bowing and string quartets and taking a breath and all those kinds of things. Is that something that you're used to? I mean, do you regularly hear about things like that and think about things like that, Abby? Yeah. Could you just talk about how that works into your thinking when you're playing?
Well, I started with violin first, and I did several years of violin before moving on to piano. So I think even more so than piano, a violinist way of thinking is more a part of my musicianship. So it helps when I hear from a different aspect.
Do you want to say anything else about that, about your just bringing in other aspects of what we're doing?
Sure. Well, I spent a lot of my younger years I'm so young anyway.
I know.
A child, baby. I was around a lot of orchestral musicians, I did a lot of choral conducting, and so I like to incorporate those things because, I mean, it just gives a new dimension. And something I always ask students is, do you play another instrument? Because then I automatically want to make that kind of relationship to them. And that was one of my first questions is, do you play anything else? And she said, I played violin. And I went, perfect.
Yeah, yeah. You know, one thing that's interesting about that to me, I mean, we're playing a percussion instrument, for God's sake, and trying to make it sound like things connect and things crescendo, and, you know, we don't actually play half notes. On a violin, you play a half note. You sing a half note. On a piano, you start a note and you wait the length of a half note before the next note happens, right? But yet to give the illusion to a listener that a note is getting louder by what's happening in the other hand, or by whatever techniques we use to create this auditory perception that isn't real, you know, is really quite remarkable. So the singing part, the metaphors with bowing and a string instrument are really interesting. The other thing I want to say just a little bit more, though, is I want to pursue a little bit more this feedback thing about just saying no, that it isn't it. Because you mentioned just a moment ago, you know, if that had happened too many times in a row, you would have done something differently and changed something. Could you just talk about just your thinking in that, and how in watching Abby, since you don't know her, you gauge, I can say no a few more times and she's not going to go to pieces, and I can, you know, push her a little bit more. I mean, how do you?
Well, she was fantastic because I noticed right away that she was thinking about it. And she even, through her language, showed me that she knew that she didn't get it.
Yeah.
So I allowed it a few more times until her language told me either I got it, or, you know, sometimes they do things that seek affirmation.
Yeah, sure.
They don't have to ask you, but they kind of look at you. or it was, you know, some things like that. Or she obviously was struggling to get it. And at that point, you know, her being a college student, I would have expected her to go, I just don't quite understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
But I would have maybe 2-3 times. And I think having her think about it first would have saved time in the long run. Now that, you know, because she is obviously a thinker. You can tell when she tried something and she didn't get it, she did something.
Yeah.
And so that told me, okay, just let her try, because she'll probably get it.
Well, this is probably a good place to pause this part of the session. And Abby, you're welcome to stay up here if you'd like to, but we're going to ask Sarah to come up. I didn't mean pause my microphone. And we're going to ask Sarah to come up too. And there's a chance for the audience to ask questions as well. And really, it's just lovely. Thank you so much, Abby. Now, Sam and I have known each other for a very long time. And I see when Sam gets excited about things, but there are a few times when I've seen him as excited about these microphones that he's going to throw at you. So I'll let him tell you about that, and then we'll.
Do you want to do that now?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Can you hear me? This is a microphone. It's in a foam box. You need to speak into the X on the top of it directly like this. When somebody wants to ask a question, raise your hand, and I'm going to throw it to you. Okay? And I didn't have a question, but I'm glad to catch the. It does. You cannot hurt it, and it will not hurt you. Ryan has one over there
As
too.
far as we know.
Yeah.
Hello. Thank you for what you've done. So thank you. My question is for Sarah. What kind of note-taking for practicing do you send your student out the door with? 'Cause
What do they go home with at the end of the lesson?
Yes.
Yeah, all of the students have a assignment notebook, 3-ring binder, and we use paper format, and they have a list of new pieces and review pieces, warm-ups, that type of thing. And when appropriate, I'll notate specific goals. Sometimes that goes in the music, sometimes that goes on the take-home sheet.
Actually write in it. A parent isn't in the room taking notes for you.
No, and those are prepared in advance, and then sometimes I'll either type. Today I usually type into it, but sometimes I handwrite. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Great. Other questions? There's one way in the back, so it's going to check your
Ryan, go over there. I'll get this one here.
long,
Ready? Who had a question?
the Hail Mary pass here. Good heavens. What? Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
I'm talking to this? Sorry.
Oh, shit.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, yes, to Jovanni and to Dr. Duke too. How much do you think is too much to tell the student exactly how you want it to be done? For example, in the beginning of the chords, that she started, she played louder the first chord, a little softer, and then she played louder again, like the third one, and when she started playing after your comments. So how much do you think, like copying exactly what I'm telling her is too much?
That's a good question. It depends what level they are at. I think people don't like this whole copy thing, like they should be their own artist. But I think if they're coming to me to learn, I think they're coming to get guidance and advice, and then they make their decisions later. So here it's like in the room, I'm giving her information, I'm showing her what is my vision of the piece. Go home, do your homework, listen to as many recordings as you can, come back, but whatever you do, be convinced of what you're doing. So, but in the studio, that's sort of my sacred space. That's my space to be right. I'm married, so I'm not right very often. So, but I understand your question and your concern. I think if she had asked the question, I don't know if I'm properly addressing what you're saying, but yeah, if she had asked the question about, well, I think it should be this way, but what you said that one was louder, one was softer. I mean, that's something technically that had to be fixed. There was no argument with that. That had to be fixed, right? And it's also a technical thing. So I tried to, instead of sitting and talking about the technique of how to make that done, I did it through demonstration instead to save some time.
I just want to add one thing to that question, and it has to do with, how much do you impose your own ideas about the music on a student? And I think, if you can only do something one way, then clearly you have not chosen that way, because it's the only way you can do it. And I think many students, including some college music majors, are of the mind that, who's to say what's right? Well, I'll say, we'll all say what's right, and that doesn't make sense, what you're doing right there, So I think it isn't a matter that once you teach somebody to do something a certain way that you have in mind, now that they are locked into that for the rest of their professional lives or personal lives or musical lives. But instead you're saying, look, you've now felt what it's like to do this in a way that's musically convincing, to use your word, which is a great word. And now you choose to do that a little bit differently. Now you're making a choice, right? But for Abby, who's never actually made that phrase do that, which you just got her to do, well then what she's doing wasn't that, she could do that, but she chose this instead. She didn't make a choice. Right? And as you say, it's not only that you're the person and this is the place for you to be right, but you do have good ideas and you can play the damn piano. So you should be saying, I think a lot of times we say, well, why, we're not trying to teach our students to play like us. I would love it if my students played like me, because I'm terrific, and the idea that the way you get somebody to actually work at something really hard is you set some aspirational goals that you say, you want to get to where you can do it just, and like when you were demonstrating with Shreyan, right? You were playing and you're trying to get him to sound like you. Again, not to say that you may only play this piece like we just did it, but to work for that goal is a very valuable thing to do for a learner. And now I think we'll go back to the 20-yard line back there.
All right. So this question is for Robert. I wanted you to talk a little bit, you started talking about feedback. And if you can talk a little bit more about that. I think many times when you have, especially somebody who is playing a piece that is kind of going towards the direction of polishing, you find yourself with many aspects that you could address. And what kind of thinking process would you go through as the instructor in order to determine the best way to give feedback at that point?
Do you want to take that a little bit?
I am a big believer in being as specific as possible. And I think often, especially when a student is getting to the polishing stage, a lot of times that feedback can actually take the form of a question, where we can set up an idea for the student and then ask them to self-assess. And again, if I ask that process of self-assessment, they're basically giving themselves feedback, but then they're also giving me a lot of information that I can help to understand why the sound isn't exactly where it needs to be. And so especially when we're getting to that polishing stage, I try to use as much of that self-assessment as possible as a form of feedback in the lesson.
Yeah. Do you want to say anything about the feedback question, just about how, you want me to talk first and then you just jump on with what I did? How about that? I think one of the things that we underestimate is how what we ask somebody to do in the moment determines a priori what kind of feedback we're going to be able to give. If I ask a learner to do something and I know the learner can't do, I only have two choices. I can give him negative feedback or lie, right? Or maybe three, I could just keep quiet, right? But one of the things that I hope you noticed both in Jovanni's lesson and in Sarah's lesson is how their approach to making changes in what the students were doing was by making small things great. If you think about all the things you're working on when you practice, you don't practice a movement to get it better, right? There are small things in what you're working on when you're practicing on your own that you try to make great, because that's what motivates your brain to actually store that procedural memory, is that you think that was it, not better, but that was it. Now, if you're working on 32 measures, you're not going to turn 32 measures of just okay into 32 measures of great, right? Just like that little passage that Jovanni worked on with Abby and what Sarah was working on with Shreyan is a small thing that both of these astute teachers are fully cognizant of the fact that I can get that kid to do it great. I mean, not great for an undergraduate or great for a little kid, but great full stop. So when you do give positive feedback, you're not saying something to be encouraging, because the brain can't discriminate between positive feedback that's for encouragement and positive feedback that's for actual behavior. So if I do something kind of crummy and you're trying to encourage me and you say really good, my brain thinks what I just did physically is really good. And it's not. Right? And I think that small thing that we observed in both of these lessons, which is really lovely, is something to take away and discuss with friends during your break time and talk about what you noticed.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please go.
One of the things in the end of that lesson is after Shreyan kind of got that hands together coordination for the first time, he kind of went, I want to try it again. And I loved that moment in his lesson because it made me realize, okay, he got it. And he wants to feel that again. He wanted to experience that. And I think that's a great moment when we see that click.
Yeah. Exactly. I think we have time for another question or two. Yeah.
I noticed, I want to go back to the question that the guy asked over here to my left. I know we were talking about the teacher emphasizing a certain interpretation or way of doing things. And I wanted to go back to Jovanni. When he started that whole thing, he said, now, I'm going to show you, I'm paraphrasing, he said, I'm going to show you something here, and you can take it or leave it. So that kind of created a framework for, his really emphasizing a certain way of doing this. And I just wanted to go back to my question would be, would it be worthwhile coming back to that at the end or intermittently while you're doing the thing? I'm doing something here, and you have to decide whether you're going to do this or not. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think that phrase was done with the mindset that this is a master class and that she's not my student. In a studio setting, I don't greet my students at the door saying, you can take what I say or leave it. This was more of a, this was more with the intention that, she's not my student. And what I have to say to her might not jive with what her teacher says, and I don't want to put the student in any kind of situation where she's, really questioning what she's being told. But in the case of going back to that question, is they just have to be convinced in what they're doing. That's all I ask from my students is to be convinced, so that they can convince me, so that they can convince their audience what they're after.
Yeah. I just one thing about that too, about the, you don't have to you can take us or leave it thing. I think when we think about things like that, we don't think in terms of time scale, right? I mean, it's like you may decide 5 years from now, you're a different person, you've gone through different life experiences, you may see this piece in a totally different way. You might have faced a life crisis of your own that makes you look at this piece and relate it to things that you haven't even experienced yet. But for right now, I know how to get you to make this sound great. And it's one of the things that we have to do as teachers is decide what are the appropriate choices for us to make for our students, and what choices are they prepared to make for themselves. I'm a very happy grandparent, and my grandchildren live in Austin. I get to see them all the time. And when they were very tiny, which they're not anymore, and it was time to go to bed, what I didn't ask them was, are you ready for bed? Because actually, I don't care. We're going to bed, But I would say, well, do you want to get your jammies on in the living room, or you want to get your jammies on in your bedroom? Because that's a decision. You can decide whatever you want, and you can decide that. But we're going to bed. So the same thing. You think about what Abby was doing with that piece, which wasn't convincing. So that's not a choice now. Do you want to play that, sort of in the flabby way that you're playing it right now? No, that's not a choice you get to make. But later you'll get to make other choices. But you can only make choices, I'm repeating myself now, you can only make choices about things that you're actually able to do. And if you can't do them, well, then it's not a choice. Then you're just stuck with that, right? I think we have time for one more pass.
This is for Jovanni. Most of us teach high school students Mozart sonatas, and so this was particularly insightful, the way that you worked with the first four measures, and I noticed how detail-oriented you were. So what do we do in our studio to motivate a high school student who's not a college piano major to really focus on details in this way in our own lessons and in our studios? Because they're just so happy they got the notes that they don't seem to go beyond that.
That's a really good question, because I'm not necessarily a detail-oriented person in any other aspect of my life. I think listening is, you have to train them how to listen to themselves and to what they're doing. But also give them a reason to, when I'm teaching my younger kids, it's always making good choices based on what they hear. And so I don't obsess so much on what, you got to play this written, like it's written on the page, but kind of building a culture of giving them good taste. And I think this is going back to the do you impose your thing? Well, kind of yes, because I'm teaching them good taste, what I think is good taste. And then like Bach is Bach's invention. He wrote them to teach good taste. And so from there, they develop a culture of noticing different things. If you catch me in the bar later on, it probably will change my answer. So that's actually, it's a good question, because it's not something that I really think about. It's something that I feel that it's more instinctive. So that's probably something, my answer is probably going to change throughout the course of this conference as I think about that a little bit more. But that was my instinct to say.
Sarah, you want?
Yeah, I would also add to that is that attention to detail has to start really at the very first lesson, and it's attention to detail on the page and attention to detail with what we hear. And so if we really build that in, I think even with Shreyan, where he's really working with more basic concepts of the staccato and the slur, the mezzo forte and the forte, if we've got that level of detail attention there, then that just will continue to grow with the child.
Yeah.
Go. I'm going to contradict myself already now that I've started thinking about it. I actually am a stickler for what's written on the page, but how that transfers into what they hear. And I read a statistic, I can't quote it right now, but what is it, like 70% of a lesson is just basically telling the student what's already on the page?
Yeah.
Or something like that. So that resonates, and I think teaching students from the very young age to read correctly, like to interpret what's on the page correctly, is really important. And a lot of times, it's right there.
You know, it's interesting when you ask a question about the motivation of high school students. I give talks for a lot of teachers who teach in different disciplines and about, you know, motivating kids to do something. And actually, I find that most children of high school age who are in situations where they're generally unmotivated are so because they're being asked to do things that they can't possibly do well in the near term, and they get no negative feedback. And I'm going to end, because I know we're out of time, with one quick little demonstration of that. If you're holding something in your hand, I'd like you to put it on the floor so your hands are free, or put it on your lap or something. So everybody's hands are free. And what I'd like you to do is, what we're all going to try to do, there's like, I don't know what, 600 people in here or something. We're going to try to clap once all together, right? But it needs to sound like one person, not like 900, but like one person. So I want you to watch me. We're going to do it together with me. I'm not going to count, right? And I'm not going to try to fake you out. Just watch, and we're going to try to do it all together once. Here we go. You ready? Here we go. That's a mess. Do it again. That was better. You guys are late. Let's do it again. Ready? That was the best one yet. Still back a little bit late on that side. Do it one more time. Okay, I'm going to stop. Now, why are you working so hard? This is stupid. You know, you pay to go to a conference in Chicago, you get back home and say, what'd you learn at the conference? Well, we all clapped once, all together. Now, I want to tell you the 3 characteristics that make that a motivating experience. You're absolutely convinced that it's possible, right? You know it's in range of what you're capable of doing right now, and you're getting negative feedback. Without all of that, brains don't learn. And when I see high school kids who people say, that's an unmotivated kid, who will sit in front of an Xbox till his thumbs bleed, that's not an unmotivated kid. Because you know what Xboxes do? You know how the games are structured? There's a very clear goal, right? The goal's doable in the near term, and there's negative feedback. That's a central part of learning anything. And there's something to chat over coffee. So Sam, thank you. Thank our teachers today and the students, and Shreyan in absentia.